Your soulmate secretly noticed the way you dress, and what they said about you will shock you. Wait, pause for a second. Something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted, and the strange part is, it didn't happen anywhere near you. It happened across town, in a room you've never been in, surrounded by people you've never met. Someone there said something about you tonight. Not a rumor, not a story. Just an honest observation, the kind that slips out before anyone realizes how much weight it carries, and the person it was meant for. They felt it land somewhere they weren't expecting. Somewhere they thought they'd already locked up. They've been holding that feeling ever since. Trying to put it down, trying to talk over it, trying to make the night keep moving. But it's still there, sitting beside them like a guest no one invited. If this message speaks to your heart, comment, "I receive this love," like the video, and subscribe for more. Let me bring you closer to what actually happened. Because the texture of this moment is what makes it matter. Picture a Friday evening, that in-between hour when the day has fully let go, but the night hasn't fully started yet. A small group of people, gathered somewhere casual, maybe a friend's place, maybe a rooftop, maybe a corner booth in a restaurant where the candles flicker every time someone walks past. Your person was there, dressed a little nicer than they needed to be, doing all the right things, laughing at the right moments, asking the right questions, looking from every angle, like someone who's exactly where they want to be. But you know how it is. You can put a whole outfit on top of a feeling. Feeling still finds a way to peek out. Conversation drifted, the way it always does. People talked about old apartments, old jobs, old versions of themselves. And somewhere in that drift a third party, someone who's only met you once or twice, someone who has no real stake in your story, mentioned you. Not in a heavy way, not loaded with anything. They just said your name in the middle of a sentence, the way you'd reference a book you remembered fondly. Stay with this, because the next part is where everything quietly changes. What this person said wasn't about the things people usually compliment. They didn't talk about your job, or your achievements, or anything you'd put on a profile. They talked about the way you dressed, the way you put yourself together. They said something like, "You know what I always noticed about them? They never looked like they were trying. Everything they wore looked like it was just theirs. Like they weren't dressing for the room. They were dressing for themselves. And somehow that made everyone else in the room pay attention." It came out almost as an afterthought. The person who said it probably forgot they said it within 5 minutes. But your person didn't forget, not even close. Their hand tightened, just slightly, around their glass. Their eyes did that small thing eyes do when a feeling moves through the body faster than the face can hide. They smiled a little, because that's what you do, but the smile didn't reach where smiles usually reach. And then they took a longer sip than usual, which they thought was casual, but a part of them knew wasn't. This is where understanding slowly begins. Because here's what they were actually feeling in that moment, and they wouldn't admit this to anyone in that room, possibly not even to themselves. They were feeling exposed, not by the third party, by the truth inside what the third party said. Because the thing about an honest observation is that it doesn't care about the story you've built around someone. It just describes them as they actually are. And the way that person described you was the way your person used to see you, back when they were paying attention, back when they were still letting themselves notice. They thought they'd gotten over noticing. They thought they'd successfully replaced you with a version of you that was easier to walk away from, a flatter version, a more forgettable version. The kind of version you assemble when you're trying to convince yourself that the connection wasn't really that special, that the spark was a trick of the light, that the chemistry was situational, that you've moved on and that's that. And then a stranger described you in 2 sentences and dismantled the whole thing. Something about this moment felt different for them, and they couldn't pretend otherwise. The conversation moved on. People started talking about something else. A show, a trip someone was planning, who knows. But your person was already gone. Physically still in the booth, still nodding, still occasionally laughing at the right places. Mentally, somewhere else entirely. In a memory they hadn't touched in a while. They were remembering a specific morning. Maybe it was a Sunday. Maybe it was the kind of morning where you didn't have anywhere to be and you'd come out of the bedroom wearing something simple. A t-shirt, soft pants, hair still doing whatever it wanted to do. And they'd looked up from whatever they were doing and just watched you for a second. Not in a romantic movie way, in a real way. The way you watch someone when you're realizing, quietly, that this is what comfort feels like. That this person doesn't have to perform for you. That they're letting you see them, and you're not running. They hadn't thought about that morning in a long time. And now it was sitting right in the front of their chest. What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything. They ordered another drink, not to get drunk, to buy themselves time. There's a specific kind of stalling people do when they're trying to outpace a feeling. And a second drink is one of the most common forms of it. It gives the hands something to hold. It gives the mouth something to do besides say the truth. It softens the edges of a thought you're not ready to look at directly. And while they were stalling, more memories came. Not in order. Not the big ones either. The small ones. The way you'd shrug into a jacket without checking yourself in the mirror, because you trusted yourself. The way you'd pick out shoes that nobody else would have put with that outfit. But on you, it just worked. The way you'd come back from a walk with your sleeves pushed up and your face open. And they'd think, without naming it, that you looked like the kind of person they wanted to be near for a long time. That last thought was the one that hit hardest, because they had pulled away from being near you. They had made choices. They had told themselves stories. They had described what happened between you in safe, sanitized terms that didn't require them to take much responsibility. And tonight, a casual sentence from someone who barely knew either of you punched a small hole in the wall they'd built around that whole chapter. This is the part they didn't see coming. It wasn't supposed to land like this. They were supposed to be having a normal Friday. They were supposed to go home and sleep and wake up tomorrow and keep doing whatever it is they've been doing to fill the space. But now there was this feeling sitting in their stomach that wouldn't move. A feeling that, if they named it honestly, would sound something like, "I've been describing this wrong to myself for a long time. You don't need to force this. Just feel it." Because the layered truth underneath what the third party said was something your person had been hiding from. The truth was that you weren't just someone they used to know. You were someone they used to see. Really see. And being seen by them and seeing them back was a kind of intimacy that's not common, and not easy to find again, and not really replaceable. No matter how many new people you meet, they knew that. Somewhere. They'd just been refusing to know it on purpose. There's a particular kind of grief that doesn't have a name in regular language. It's the grief of pretending. The grief of having had something real, and then having to live alongside the choice you made about it. It doesn't show up loudly. It shows up at small gatherings, in passing comments, in songs that come on at the wrong time. And tonight, all three of those happened at once. Because as they walked out of the place later, earlier than they planned, they passed a speaker that was playing a song. Not your song, not anything specific. Just a song with a certain mood. The kind of song that sounds like a slow exhale. And it slowed them down for half a second, even though they were trying to keep moving. If you've felt this shift too, you already understand. Outside, the air did that thing air does on certain nights, where it feels heavier than it should. They stood there for a minute before getting in the car, or ordering the ride or starting to walk. Whatever the case was. They just stood there, holding the feeling. Not fighting it as hard as they'd been fighting it earlier. Maybe because they were a little tired. Maybe because the drinks had softened them. Maybe because there's only so long anyone can hold up a wall before they have to set it down for a minute. In that minute, a thought arrived. Not loudly, just clearly. The thought was, I've been telling myself I'm fine, and I'm not actually fine about this. That's a hard thought to let in. Most people would push it out again immediately. But for some reason, tonight, they let it stay. This is where things quietly began to shift. Once that thought was in the room, other things started moving with it. The story they'd been telling about you didn't fit anymore. The version of you they'd flattened into something forgettable. That version dissolved. What replaced it was the real you. The you who paid attention to details. The you who showed up consistently. The you who never needed them to perform. The you who, when you walked into a room, didn't try to dominate it, but somehow ended up being the center of how they felt about that room anyway. And they realized, with a slow and uncomfortable honesty, that they'd been comparing every new person to you without admitting it. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that wrecked their dates or made them unfair to anyone. Just in a quiet background way. A subtle measuring stick they didn't know they were using. The way someone dressed. The way someone carried themselves. The way someone made them feel calm or made them feel performative. They'd been holding everything up against the way you used to do those things, and almost nobody was clearing the bar. That's what the third-part comment exposed. Not that you were perfect. You weren't. Nobody is. But that something about your particular way of being in the world had set a standard in their nervous system. And that standard hadn't gone away just because you weren't physically around. And this is where regret starts to do its quiet work, not the loud kind of regret, not the kind that has you crying on the floor, the slower kind, the kind that just sits in the chest and asks questions you can't immediately answer. Questions like, why was I in such a hurry to walk away from something that was actually working? What was I trying to prove? Who was I trying to be? And was that person even me, or was I just running from being known? These aren't questions you answer in one night. But the questions themselves are the shift. The asking is the shift. What happens next isn't loud, but it matters more than they realize. When they got home, they didn't do the thing they usually do. They didn't turn on the TV right away. They didn't scroll. They sat on the edge of their bed for a while, still wearing their jacket, looking at nothing in particular. And after a few minutes, they picked up their phone, and almost without thinking about it, scrolled to your name. They didn't open the messages, they just sat with the screen, the little bit of light on their face, in a mostly dark room. The name there, the way a name is when you haven't said it out loud in a while. A thought crossed their mind, maybe I let go too quickly. They closed the phone, then opened it again, then closed it. You know that loop. We've all done that loop with someone, at some point. The loop where the part of you that wants to reach out and the part of you that's afraid to are wrestling so quietly that nobody else in the world can hear it. They didn't send anything tonight. That's the truth. They didn't write a long apology. They didn't draft a hey, just thinking about you. They didn't do any of the things that would have made for a more dramatic story. But here's what they did do, and this is the part that actually matters. They stopped pretending, in their own head, in the privacy of their own apartment, in the silence, after a night that didn't go the way they expected. They stopped pretending they were over it. They stopped pretending the timing was the only problem. They stopped pretending they didn't still think about you in those small, unguarded moments before sleep when the day stops protecting you from yourself. If this resonates, let it settle in you. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to react. You don't have to send a message back into a quiet that hasn't broken yet. You just have to know it. Because here's the thing about how these moments work. You don't always get the satisfaction of a text that morning. You don't always get the dramatic reconciliation. Sometimes the shift just happens in the dark, in a room you can't see into. in the chest of someone who isn't ready to say anything yet. And the shift is still real, even if you don't get to witness it. There's a verse I keep thinking about with this. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Not your time, not their time. It's time. And there's a quiet relief in that if you let it be quiet. Because it means you don't have to engineer this. You don't have to manage their feelings from a distance. You don't have to plot reunions or perform availability or play any of the games that drain your peace. You just have to keep being the person they were describing tonight. The one who dresses for themselves. The one who carries themselves without performing. The one whose presence does its work in the background, even when you're not in the room. That person is hard to forget. Tonight proved that. And this is where understanding slowly begins to take its real shape. Because what your person realized tonight isn't going to disappear when they wake up tomorrow. It's going to be there in the morning, slightly softened, slightly quieter, but there, it's going to follow them into their day, into their commute, into the next conversation where someone reminds them of something about you, even tangentially. Into the next time they walk past a store window and see something you would have worn and feel that specific small pull behind their ribs. This is how realization actually works in real life. Not in a single dramatic moment. In a series of small, accumulating moments that stop being deniable. And here's the gentle part. The part I want you to hold on to as you go to sleep tonight, or as you get up tomorrow, or as you go about whatever your week looks like. You didn't lose anything by being yourself. You didn't make the wrong move by not chasing. You didn't ruin anything by giving them space. In fact, the space is part of what made this possible. The space gave the truth room to surface in them. The space removed your voice from the equation, so they could finally hear their own. What they're hearing now, in that voice, is something they should have been listening to all along. That they were lucky. That they were known, that they were seen by someone who didn't need them to be anything other than what they were, and that they walked away from that partly out of fear, partly out of confusion, partly out of a self-protective instinct that turned out not to protect them at all. They're sitting with that now. And what I want you to take from this, more than anything else, is that you were never imagining it. The connection wasn't something you inflated in your mind. The way they used to look at you wasn't something you romanticized in hindsight. It was real. It is real. The proof of it is in the fact that tonight, a stranger's casual sentence was enough to crack open everything they'd been pretending about you. You can't fake that kind of vulnerability. People don't go quiet over a glass of wine for someone they didn't truly feel something for. So tonight, while you're doing whatever ordinary thing you're doing, making tea, washing your face, putting your phone on the charger, lying down with your eyes still open, know that there's a parallel room somewhere out there. And in that room, someone is sitting with the weight of being told the truth about you, by someone who didn't know they were doing it. And that truth is going to keep working on them, long after they've forgotten the conversation that started it. You don't have to chase this. You don't have to test it. You don't have to message anyone or wait for a notification or read into the next coincidence that lands in your day. You just have to keep being who you've always been. The person they were describing tonight. The person they couldn't drink away. The person who slipped into a conversation and refused to slip back out. And what they're beginning to realize now is something they can't walk away from anymore. Not this time.